In this lesson, we'll talk about a couple of ways that Mudbox works really well with Photoshop. So, even though Mudbox provides so much functionality as far as sculpting and painting, there may be instances where we're more comfortable in something like Photoshop to do some of the painting for our textures. And so there are a number of ways that we can actually use Mudbox in conjunction with Photoshop. So this is lesson 13 start. It's just kind of where we left off before the PTEX lesson. And so if we go into the paint layers, you can see that we've got a number of different paint layers, 3 different diffuse layers. And so if we want to start to come in and modify this this base color, let's say, this texture, or maybe add a new layer, maybe do something like that, we can actually integrate our layers here with Photoshop very quickly and easily. So let's go ahead and right click on our layer, and down all the way at the bottom you'll see export channel to PSD. And so what we can do is go ahead and say I'm going to export this whole channel, and let's actually go into the lesson 13 start. And so we'll go ahead and call this something like Rex Color PSD, and we'll save it. And as soon as we save it, a couple of things will happen. Photoshop's going to automatically load up that file, and if I minimize that, you can see that we have a little window that says that Mudbox is watching this file that we saved, so it knows whether any changes have been made to it. So right now this button here for re-importing is grayed out because it knows that nothing has been changed yet. It's telling us we can now edit this in our external editor, which in this case is Photoshop. So within Photoshop we have several layers here. We have the color base, we have the back color, and we have the spot. So all of those layers that we have, those paint layers, have come through. We also have a layer for the diffuse background, and then we have a layer that has our UV layout on top. So we can come in and modify these layers, or we can add new layers. So let's add a new layer, and we'll just say OK to that, and we'll just put it up on top, and then we can start to make any sort of modifications that we want to make to our mesh. So let's say that we want to start to add some spots. So we'll go ahead and get maybe a bright green, get our paintbrush, and this could be anything that you feel more comfortable doing in Photoshop. And so we can just come in and, just as an example, start to drop in some spots along his back. Okay, we can do the same thing over here just to kind of illustrate this. If you wanted to modify, brighten up the eyes, or do any sort of painting on the eyes, you could do that, modify that within that base. Okay, so let's say that we've got a little bit of spots that we've added here. So now all we have to do is go ahead and save this file. So we'll just hit save. And now when we jump back into Mudbox, you can see that it has watched this, and it says, okay, that's now changed since we exported it, because it noted that we just saved it. Now re-import rexcolor.psd is highlighted, or it's available to us now. And so what we can do is go ahead and say re-import, and then I'll go ahead and re-import those layers. Okay, we'll go ahead and close that down. Now you can see that we now have this new layer 1. I'm going to go ahead and drag it back up to the top. You can see that we have this layer 1 here, and we can use all of our blend modes. If we wanted to use multiply, we could come in and do that, and then we can do any sort of painting on this that we want. If we want to start to come in and erase part of it, you treat this just like any other paint layer. Okay. Now jumping back over to Photoshop, we could come in and, let's say, change this layer to multiply within Photoshop, and let's save this. Okay, we'll jump back into Mudbox. Alright, and let's actually now come in and import channel from PSD. And we'll go into our project files, find our file, and go ahead and re-import that. And let's actually delete this for a second so we can illustrate this. It's kind of hard to see. So we'll go ahead and delete this, and let's re-import. Go into lesson 13, bring that in. Okay, And so our layer blend mode has actually come through from Photoshop. So this time I didn't have to change it to multiply because I had already changed it within Photoshop. Okay, and so you have that ability as well. Then we could come in here and modify anything else that we wanted to here in Photoshop and just save it out and then re-import that back in, and we have that nice flexibility. If there are some things that you feel more comfortable doing in Photoshop, then you have that ability to come in and do that. Okay, and still it's on its own paint layer because we've created that layer in Photoshop, so you can dial that in however you want to do it. Okay, now there's also a method for coming in and painting based on a particular view. So rather than painting a layer, let's say that I want to actually paint something just right on the screen and have it baked into the texture. So what I can do is go under File, and we want to export the screen to PSD. And you can see there are hotkeys for that, for exporting and re-importing. So I want to export the screen. Okay, this will give us the ability to change the image size that we're going to be using. We'll go ahead and say Export to PSD. And this one we'll just call Screen. Okay, same thing will happen. Photoshop's going to open up that file, and this time we're just getting the color. We're not getting any of that ambient occlusion or anything. And so what I can do is come in, and you can see here on the layers we've got the shading, we've got the Mudbox texture, gives us an indication this is where we're supposed to paint. This is the original texture. We don't want to paint on that, and then our geometry, background, so forth. So we want to concentrate here on this particular layer. And let's say maybe we want to add, I don't know, a scar or something that we can paint a little bit better here in Photoshop. And so we can come in and start to paint that in. Okay. Come in and paint some claw marks or something. And then all we have to do is save this. So we'll just go Save. And now we'll jump back into Mudbox. It's going to say that that screen is actually changed. Do we want to re-import it or close? Let's actually move our model a little bit. So this camera angle is different from the one that we exported. If we go ahead and re-import, it's going to pop that right back to that camera angle and bring those changes in onto our model. So we don't have to necessarily be in the same spot to get that to work. Now you can kind of see it in here, but it's actually on this layer 1 that we created, okay? Because we have that layer selected. And so you can see as I dial that up that that is actually in there, but it's really, really light, okay? So if we want to actually come in and add that to our base color, we want to make sure that that base color is selected. We can go ahead and now re-import from PSD. Same file. We now have that color selected, the base selected. Go ahead and re-import that, and that'll bring that image back in. So if you want to, you can save that, just save those images and re-import them, or you can just use that connection. So that brings it into that base color, and then you can continue painting. You see that's part of our texture now. All right, so maybe not necessarily the exact detail that I want to add, but you can see where it's really a powerful workflow in working between Mudbox and Photoshop, where you can really have this nice connection directly between the two applications and be able to go back and forth, making changes here in Photoshop, doing any sort of modifications that you want to make, and then taking that work back out to Mudbox and having that applied back to your mesh and being able to continue on from there. All right, so Mudbox is really nice about integrating with the different applications. Photoshop is one of those applications that it works well with, and so make sure to check that out. All right, so the next thing that we want to look at is extracting maps in Mudbox. So this is important because we can't really use the high resolution meshes that we sculpt directly in most cases. We have to extract normal maps or displacement maps and things like that. So we'll go ahead and take a look at that process in the next lesson.